It is the Blue Room. It is your weekly show as we clatter towards another weekend when the Toffees are back, looking for an elusive first win of the new year, 2024. It has been a while. Joining me to talk about why that is, why we're still waiting, are Mick Green. Mick, how are you, mate?
Yeah, considering what happened on Monday, not too bad actually. Formula One came back yesterday, so I've been happily distracted with that the last 2 days, and you've just pulled me straight back in just when I thought I was getting away. But yeah, I think considering how we played on Monday, I think I expected it to have a very down week, but it's not been the worst week.
I think I'd rather watch that game on repeat on Monday than Formula One. At least like something might happen that you don't predict. Anyway, let's not go down that rabbit hole. And also joining us is Patrick Ridge. Patrick, do you like Formula One?
No, I was just gonna echo your sentiment there and say I think I'd maybe this is, I know Mick's maybe a bit more of a Sean Dyche fan than myself. It's like maybe that's his excitement that he gets some spotlight back down to earth with F1, but no, each of their own. Innit? I mean, I do like cycling, so I'm not one to talk. That's essentially the same thing, except with
Yeah.
blokes.
At least there's a lot of drugs and excitement in that.
Yeah, exactly. There's more doping in that.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, maybe that's just mixed excitement threshold. Sean Dyche in Formula One just tickle his fancy a little bit.
Now, if he's listening, I'll plan a watch party. Me and Sean watching the
I'm
F1.
gonna say, do you reckon Sean Dyche is an F1 fan?
He was at Silverstone last year, so
Right, okay, so right, yeah, he definitely is then. Yeah.
See, this could explain a lot. This,
yeah.
we might be getting to the root of the problem here.
He was on. I remember there was a picture he was on. Obviously, like Silverstone itself is like a festival, and like the build up to the race on the Sunday. And I think there must have been like a Radio One tent. And obviously Jordan North is a Radio One DJ, big Burnley fan, and there was a picture of him and Sean Dyche on obviously like the DJ decks on a Saturday afternoon, which I'm sure was a sight. Do you know if you'd have a couple of drinks during the day, you just came in, listen to a bit of music, and Sean Dyche is your DJ.
Yeah, that sounds more exciting than the actual race. I mean, that'll be worth going for. But listen, we have dallied on Formula One a bit too much. We are gonna delve into Monday's game a little bit more. We are going to speak about what feels like the endless wait for clarification over how many points we've got and who our owners are going to be as well, of course. And we'll look ahead to Brighton and look back a little bit at last season and the 5-1 win there. But we are going to start with Monday. I can't believe we're going to go there again. I'm sure all the listeners don't want to revisit it again, but we'll quickly touch upon it. Patrick, I'll come to you first, mate. It was bad. It was very, very bad. And we were just talking there before we started recording, and I think we've had some stylistic lows certainly over the past few years, but I can't remember being as frustrated and feeling as lost with what we're trying to do as I was on Monday night sat in that ground.
Yeah, no, obviously I wasn't at the game, but it was one of those before the match, like I started getting that feeling of like, oh, just felt like one of them. And when it feels like one of them with Everton, it nearly always is. They don't really surprise us that often, do they? Especially at Goodison. And I said earlier this week, I'm probably more confident about the game on Saturday against Brighton in the way of, I think that game will suit how Everton want to play more, and obviously then it'll just be about keeping a very good team out at the other end. But there's been a lot of chat, and I've done a big piece in it in our channels today, but about how you know Everton attack, and for me, it's not wanting to see style over substance. Definitely, I think Sean Dyche has done a really, really solid job in a lot of things. Like the defense has been brilliant; it's improved so much. Gone from like the 19th worst in terms of last season, in terms of what they should have conceded, to now the fourth best, and the right up there for actual goals conceded and everything. So that's all fine. I think the away games are generally okay. Like, Wolves and Villa aside, when for whatever reason they just had off days, every other away game they've been in it, even against City. Like I mean, maybe if they'd have been able to win a corner against City, who knows? But City are just on a different planet. But the home games, specifically against teams that allow Everton to have the ball, and I think Dyche made a big mistake in not having Onana on from the start, because he's the only midfielder Everton have got that really, to my mind, keeps things ticking. Like James Garner's busy, he gets about, he's not bad on the ball, but he's just not quite a Nana in that sense. Doesn't really want to take it off the defense as much. So then the result is just going long and kind of trying to barge the door down all the time. And look, eventually it worked because they were chasing the game and Palace sat back and, got a set piece, and that's fine. But I think we just need to start seeing some variety now to the attack. It's not about asking to play out from the back. It's not about, wanting, I don't know, overlapping centre backs or, a silky number 10 that Everton just don't have. I think it's got to be just some basic movement. And I appreciate we haven't got the most athletically blessed front line. But there was a point when we were chasing the winner on Monday where Mikalenko and McNeil were stood still on the touchline while McNeil had the ball. And then he got worked over to the right, and Harrison and Godfrey did exactly the same. And there was just no movement, none of them making a run. And it just feels at the minute like it's just, we've only got one way of playing from open play. And Mick can, I don't know if Mick agrees with that, but that's what it seems like to me. And in games where we're increasingly seeing teams sit back against us, it's becoming a real problem.
Yeah. Did you think Mick is as well, like before looking at like maybe you've got some numbers there and stuff, has the style of football changed a lot, do you think, recently? Because it's certainly to me, like being in the ground, just watching it without having any kind of raw data or looking at it, like it feels like the last 2 or 3 games, maybe going back to that Luton Cup game, yeah, I've just found it so much harder to watch and so less palatable. And I don't know if that's because we're not getting results or the results we want necessarily anymore, which automatically makes it harder to stomach. The players maybe are a bit knackered. We're running out of steam a little bit, so we're going a bit more direct. I mean, do you think there's been a big difference recently, or is it just sort of one of those result bias things that if we're not winning, not getting the results that we want, then it automatically just becomes a little bit harder anyway?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I've seen such a stark difference between, performances especially in the last game against Palace. I think, because I mean, the Spurs match, for instance, I thought Everton played quite well that day, especially first half. I think second half, I think we struggled, and then the last 10, 15 minutes, surprisingly, I suppose we rallied, considering we were behind, and in the end, even though we drew, probably came out of the game still disappointed that we didn't actually win. And I think in the last 3 games overall, not include the City, so Spurs, City, and Luton, I think we've kind of seen like almost like a microcosm of what Sean Dyche wants to do, and when it's good, this is how good it can be. At the same time, as in with the Spurs game, and then against City, we've seen, this is what he's going to do against better and bigger teams. And we've seen the strength in that, and how I suppose we kind of stifled City at times, but then at the same time, how they stifled us with, how we were trying to lob balls into behind for Ashley Young, and I suppose the limitations that the squad and that has in those type of games. And then I think we also saw, I suppose, the main weakness in the side at the moment against Palace, and how we're just completely limited, and I think we don't help ourselves. But when the onus is on us, we have 63% possession on Monday. It didn't feel like that at times, especially didn't feel like that. And you mentioned just before we came on, I think it was in the last 15 minutes in the first half, and I felt like watching the game, and I felt like watching the fans around me as well on the top balcony. It was like everyone had completely lost their heads, and it felt like there was a moment where I think it was just before. Or just around where Everton played the short free kick and Calvert-Lewin won it outside the box. And I think in and around that moment, Everton were okay. They had a nice little spell, and then they didn't take it on after that. And then Palace took it on instead. And it was like there was a moment there where I think a better team, or a better version of this Everton, a better coach side in possession, or a similarly coach side with perhaps better players, take it on and punish Palace. And instead, they kind of, how we saw in the early part of the season, the opposition kind of grew in confidence rather than us. And, annoyingly, really, after that spell, Palace didn't really have anything. And, the goal comes out with nothing. And it's just massively frustrating, and how that happened. And then, really, because you watch the game back, well, you think about the game back. I've not been weird enough to watch that game back, because I like happiness in my life.
Dave said he watched it back on Monday. Couldn't believe, sorry, on Tuesday. Couldn't believe
Psychopath. But really, despite the performance, again, similar to early part of the season, the performance being quite crap, you always come out and go, the Tarkowski chance. Straight as soon as we scored, he has a chance to win it. Really like minute differences between 3 points there at the end. In terms of the stylistic thing, and I think this is an issue that I've got with Everton, full stop at the moment, is that as soon as and it's hard to criticise because I think in terms of the mentality side of the players, I think compared to 12 months ago or compared to even 6 months ago, I think in the last 2 home games we've came from behind to obviously not win, but obviously pick up points, which is definitely a limitation of this side at the start of the season, and probably still is really. But I think so it's hard to criticise the mentality overall, especially with the points deduction. But I think there's too much of a tendency to, it's like we either go behind or there's a realization in real time that we're not doing anything in open play yet. We need to, go full tilt, and full tilt doesn't mean let's pick up the intensity and let's do what we were doing with more zip, more confidence. It means, let's get the ball to Tarkowski and start binning it long. There was a moment in the first half where we weren't really going anywhere, and Jordan Pickford turned into a quarterback for 5 minutes. It was like about 3 times in a row the same thing happened where he was further ahead than our centre backs. But it's not like he was picking out really. I mean, there was nearly one moment where he nearly got Calvert-Lewin behind, but there just seems to be a tendency to, rather than maybe a better team with the ball, or maybe a more confident team with the ball, goes, we're just going to continue doing what we're doing. And I know it doesn't kind of work for us, because we're not. I don't think we're that type of team who works on pattern to play where we do just keep on continue doing what we're doing, because I don't think there's a framework to continue doing anyway. But at the same time, there is. And I think we saw it in the second half as well, and it leads to us just being so sloppy in that, rather than just taking our time and rather than just settling down, just keeping the ball for a bit. It is that case of the ball needs to go in the box ASAP, and if it doesn't, then all hell's going to break loose. And I think that's probably the biggest criticism, and it happened even when we were winning games as well. It happened, I remember, against Chelsea. There was just it's almost like we're too urgent at times. I think I've not looked at numbers for a while now, but I know at the beginning of January we were in terms of directness, we were the fastest team in the Premier League, and I assume we're probably still at the top, or at least in the top 3. And I think we've just got to be more composed, and that doesn't mean having 63% possession every week. It doesn't mean having stale possession in our own half. But sometimes it does mean just keep the ball for a bit, slowly progress, rather than we're still trying to aim to get the ball in the right areas, in the same areas. But there's, I suppose, the difference in doing it in terms of having James Tarkowski and Jordan Pickford as quarterbacks compared to having a clear framework to progress through the thirds. And I think that's probably the next step for this Everton side. And until we develop in that area, I think. It's not a surprise really that I think if you matched up the Crystal Palace game on Monday and the Luton game in January, or even the Luton game at the start of September, very, very similar performances really.
Yeah, like it's interesting what you're saying there, because I think we're just sort of like in this weird in-between phase at the moment where you're right. Like, I want to see us be more intense and play with more zip and, be direct in a good way and a productive way. But you're right as well. Like, we also need to keep the ball better and just have a deep breath at times as well. But they feel like two very distinct, different concepts. And it feels like if we were in the in the ground, what Goodison's like, and maybe this is like sort of what James Garner was alluding to a bit in his comments. Like, if you're in the ground, like in Everton, we're just knocking the ball around the back, like looking and waiting and being patient. There will be people going, "Oh, for fuck's sake, just get it forward." This is doing me head in. And then if we did that and we played direct like we did on Monday, there'd be people going, "Oh my god, this is almost." It's sort of like you can't quite win. And I think finding that sweet spot is really difficult for us, because we're not. I suppose we're not a team that's technically gifted enough to split the centre backs or have inverted wing backs and all this kind of thing and play and pass and pass and pass and wear teams down. But I don't know if I don't know if we're so limited and we've got such bad players that it needs to be quite as one directional on Route 1 as it was on Monday, Mick.
No, I think, and I think this is quite a timely comparison considering he was on the punditry on Monday night for Monday Night Football, Jesse March, and a couple of times this season and it's obviously not going to be a common comparison because it's Sean Dyche. He's not Austrian or German or even American. But I think there are quite a lot of similarities between our style of play at the moment compared to the Red Bull model method. Sorry, that model where it's it's a model, to be honest, that I think a lot of people over the last 5 years have said this is not just what Everton need to do in terms of off the pitch building, but in terms of stylistics on the pitch as well. That heavy intensity football focused on pressing. You're on the front foot and aggressive and dominant, but without the ball. And I think that's how I see, the perfect type of Everton. Having control and being the better side, but not necessarily being the better side with 70-80% possession, because I just don't think that works. But not with our fan base, not with our fan base anyway. I just don't think that stylism kind of aligns with Evertonians. But I think one of the main criticisms, wider criticisms with the Red Bull model, and one of the limitations of that style is that it gets so ingrained into the players, and I think it gets so ingrained into the coaching staff as well. And I'm not saying Sean Dyche has been watching, Ralph Rangnick videos for the last 12 months, but there's almost like this tendency is that as soon as you get the ball, it's, turn around and go. It's that tendency to everything's done with such a tempo, and there's kind of like just complete ignorance to having stable possession. There's that complete like sort of ignorance to just not wanting to have the ball, not wanting to actually dictate the tempo yourself. It's almost like everything's got to be 100 mile an hour, and I think we see the benefits of that, of course, because I think in full flight, and I think we saw this against Newcastle, we saw this against Chelsea. We've seen this at times even in games that we've lost, when the team's fully fit and on top of form. As soon as there are transitional moments, we're one of the best sides in the league. I think we're really good at attacking space, really good at creating opportunities and winning turnovers. And I think in the back of the manager's head, and I think in the back of the players' head, definitely on the pitch, they know that that's what they're very good at. And it's almost a case of, well, we are very good at that, so let's turn every single moment into that. And it doesn't need to be like that. And I think we've seen that in the last couple of games where it doesn't necessarily have to be like that, but we're forcing it to be like that. And other teams like Palace, who just sat deep at times, have just gone, all right then, if you want to force this long, or if you want to play quick football all the time into space that isn't there, then you're just going to be stifled, really, and we have been.
Yeah, and your piece you've done, Patrick, sort of alludes to this, because it does sort of feel like, through a combination of our squad running out of gas, the squad being small, or teams just kind of getting onto what we're about, that over the course of the season, as you illustrate in the article, the numbers show that our attack and play, while good and average for a Premier League side overall throughout the entire season, there is been a significant drop off, hasn't there, recently?
Yeah, I think Mick referred to it there. So, like, the high turnovers thing, that's Everton have been all season long one of the best teams at that. Now there's kind of two sides to it. One, it does drain energy. I think Mick will attest to that. Teams that press high, and Everton aren't. They're not like a pressing machine as such. They're not. They're not Liverpool. They allow PPDA, which is essentially how many passes you allow your opponents on average before you press to win the ball back. Everton are around about 13, 14 for that in the league. So it's not like they're lunatics with that. But what they do is they pick their moments really well, and they have done all season. So only Spurs have forced more high turnovers per game, and a high turnover is essentially where a team wins possession back within 40 yards of the opposition goal. So per game, all season, only Spurs have won more, and the average is like 0.6 difference from Spurs to Everton. Everton do it 10 times per game on average, and that's, I think, actually why, weirdly, we were so effective in those games against Spurs, and probably should have got more out of it, is because they're like, I see those Spurs games, Mick referred to it as well, as almost being like, they're our kryptonite, and Spurs, where Spurs is kryptonite, like the way Everton get on the front foot and press in that regard against a team like Spurs is really good, because we can kind of get at them, get them on the break. But then obviously when Spurs break that press, as they did a few times, they have the quality to hurt us. So there's that side of it, but it is draining. You can't do it in every game. So again, Palace and Luton and teams like that are now just saying, when they come to Goodison, it's different away. They have to get on the front foot. But when they come to Goodison, they can just say, well, we'll sit in our shape. I know, okay, there might be 1 or 2 times that we win the ball back high, as we did the other night. But if you've got enough defenders back, you're probably going to be able to deal with it. And then it also relies on players making the correct decision. And obviously we've seen that a lot this season. We haven't done it. What I would like to see more of then from open play is almost like the winner that we scored against Palace at Selhurst Park. And I know that obviously that was in a game right at the end of the game. It was all a bit stretched, but Everton had been under the cosh for a good 20 minutes. And then they just had a moment. They had about 5 minutes of just keeping the ball, like not all the time, but just managing to keep the ball away from their goal and kind of everyone take a breather. And then out of nothing, really, Garner plays a nice one too with Decore and you through. And yeah, you can't do that 10 times a game necessarily without, you unless you're Man City, you're not going to be able to do that all the time. But it feels like if we are trying it, we really don't even know how to get into those positions at the minute. That's what I mean about wanting to just see a bit more variety. Because at the minute, it feels like if we can't win the ball back high in open play, then we don't really have any way of creating chances other than a cross. And my other thing, again, is not getting into favourable crossing positions. I mean, McNeil put in 2 brilliant deliveries the other night, and if Calvert-Lewin's in form, maybe he puts them away. But again, the issue is, when you look at the numbers, those chances don't actually come out as good a chances as you might think. I think the combined XG was like 0.22, and so like I think that's a sitter for a striker. But what's made it a sitter is that Calvert-Lewin's really athletic, he's really quick off the mark, and he can jump really high, and he's made a good chance out of it. Like if that's Neil Mope in the box, it's not even an opportunity. So it's kind of like you've got to take it both ways as well. So I just want to see us getting into positions more where. And I think this is what the coaching staff can work on, and it definitely comes from the players making the right decisions, and that's got to come down to them as well with composure and quality. But if you can have, I don't know, in training, if I'm sure they do those small-sided attack versus defense games, like what is it that we do in training? Are we just bombarding the box in those situations, or are we working on little? It doesn't even have to be intricate, but like I said, just the fullback maybe making an overlapping run, or one of the midfielders just making a third man run. We've seen it happen this season, so I think we can do it. I think we're just stuck in a rut at the minute, and this is where the appeal and the points deduction adds everything in, because I had a conversation, it might be with yourself, Mick, like around about the points deduction, and when it came in, and I was just like, I really wanted to see this season just a bit of progression on that possession side from Dyche. And then I guess what's happened, like if Everton were 10th, we might be seeing that. We might be, if Everton had the points that they've earned this season and there was no points deduction, we might be able to see Dyche be willing to take a bit more risks. But because of the points deduction, he's maybe not willing to do that. Then the issue comes as well, has Dyche ever done that in his career? Not really sure, but has he ever had the players? And then perversely, it feels like the games that Everton have coming up that they really need to win at home, against Forest, against Sheffield United, Sheffield United's main, but against Forest, Brentford to an extent, games like Palace on Monday, it's that we need that little bit of extra to go and win those matches. So it's like the chicken and egg thing, what comes first. So I feel like at the minute we need a few things. We need to find a bit more variety to our play at home, but we also need a bit of luck as well and a bit of rub of the green, because we have created some good chances. We've created the one that Calvert-Lewin had against Villa, haven't we? And he was put through, and Decore, obviously, he's like a yard offside. If he just delays his run in that game, maybe he wins. We created chances against Fulham from open play and from set plays. So, like, I think I wrote in the piece, I think against Fulham we had 6 big chances. So Opta say that you should really score from those chances. Missed all of them. Like, it does come down to finishing as well. And as we've seen all season, the players just aren't performing when it really matters.
Yeah, you're right. And I think it is, it can be as simple as, if our £25 million striker in the summer or our number 9, if we're all desperate to get fit, are in form, then this does look a lot different, doesn't it? And we're probably absolutely fine. but yeah, we won't dally on that game any longer anyway. But yeah, tough one. Just sort of in general, then, Mick was still waiting for a result from the Premier League appeal, our appeal to the Premier League. Even we're still waiting on ratification of this takeover, which seems to just be leaving space for even more terrifying stories to come out of our 777 every single day. How are you feeling about that side of things at the moment? Because I think James Garner alluded to it in his post-match comments on Monday that maybe it is starting to impact the players. I know Dyche has spoken about it today, and I know he's spoken about it in the embargo section that's going to come later as well in regards to feeling as though it's getting a bit ridiculous now. It does sort of all of a sudden feel like this is becoming not someone that's galvanized us, but a bit of a weight around everybody's neck now that just needs to be sorted on all fronts.
Yeah, I think Monday's performance was maybe the first time since the United game straight after the point deduction where it was a bit like, I think everyone could just do with a little bit of clarity here. Even if the 10 points are maintained, it was, I think just having that, clear-minded view of, we know exactly where we are in the table. Because it's not even just affecting us. I think it can be. I don't think it can be doubted the impact from a positive point of view that it's had on teams like Luton in particular. If you can only imagine that, annoyingly, I watched part of the first half last night against Liverpool, and you can only imagine the difference in performance if say, the opportunity last night for them wasn't to go out of the relegation zone, but was to just bridge the gap to Nottingham Forest. There's a world where Everton could be, I think it's 13 points clear of Luton come Sunday, and there's a world where they can still be a point ahead of them. The fact that that's still happening, we're in February approaching March. I don't think anyone, if after the point deduction came out in November, if you'd been told that, come March, you're still not going to know whether that point deduction is actually going to be, I suppose, validated by the Premier League or the next independent commission. Rather, I think I would have been quite shocked at that. And I think it's also, I suppose, probably the effect on what's happening, what's the knock-on effect to, the other cases that are going on with ourselves and Nottingham Forest as well. I know there was murmurs when we were charged again alongside Forest that neither team would want to be going into that next commission, I suppose, until they understand the hearing and understand what's actually come out of the next report in terms of the appeal. So you would think that at the moment, that timeline, that very rigid timeline that we've all seen, where I think the appeal has got to be put in for the second commission by the end of the first week of April. That's 4 or 5 weeks ago. I think it's really. I think at this point,
and then Nick as well, like if that appeal takes as long as this one, like we're June, July, aren't we then? Like before we find out if we could potentially be relegated or not, it's insane.
But I don't think if it got to that point, I'm fairly sure, like legally, the Premier League has got to be, in terms of like the next season, the Premier League clubs have got to be, like it's got to be put in stone basically by June the 30th. I think it is, if not earlier than that. I'm just thinking about back to last season when. I'm sure as soon as the season finishes, there's obviously a big get together of all the Premier League clubs in terms of the rules setting for the next season. I think that's before the end of June, and I think at that point everything's pretty much got to be signed up for the season ahead. So if we're getting to a point where two teams don't actually know whether they're going to be in the league or not by that point, what indirect and direct impacts long term is this actually having? And part of me thinks maybe this is a hopeful path where the Premier League kind of, and I suppose, well, actually, I've kind of just talked itself out of me in the back of my head, and that the Premier League's issue now is that it's out of their hands now. It's with an independent commission. To me, if I was the Premier League, I'd be quickly scurrying back. I've opened a can of worms here that I don't want to open anymore. Everton just have a fine. Nottingham Forest just have a fine. for your second charge, Everton, you can have a point deduction, but it goes on to next season. Because I think you do have to. I was looking at the timeline on Monday, and it was, if things aren't, in terms of the second commissions, aren't going to get started until, and I know there are a few rumours that in Everton's case, the second case has already started, which to me seems baffling, considering, Sean Dyche is very adamant today that the football club have no idea what the outcome is of the next appeal. So if the second commission has already started, what's going on there? Is it just, a group of people just around the desk just looking at each other going, we're talking here, but none of this might mean nothing by the end of the week. So it's just, I think it says a lot, and especially the last couple of weeks in terms of the waiting for the next outcome has probably been the perfect summary for the absolute mess that the Premier League is in at the moment. It's a farce, really, isn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Patrick, you've been all over this, mate. How are you feeling about it all? Are you surprised it's taken this long?
I always thought, just as soon as when we obviously all found out at the end of January when the hearing was taking place, we literally found out the day before, didn't we? On the Tuesday, the 29th, Tuesday the 30th, sorry, that it was going to start on the 31st of January. I always then suspected 16th to 23rd, and we're still in that thing. And that was just me going off what the last time the commission took 3 to 4 weeks to put together their report. So as we record this on Thursday, Friday, the 23rd, tomorrow, February, that will be 3 weeks since the hearing ended. So I'm not going to put my neck out necessarily and say it's definitely going to be tomorrow, but I do expect it in the next, I do think it'll be by the middle of next week that they'll have a decision. The issue is that as Mick alluded to, and I think it might be Mikey Gow who put it on Twitter last week or X or earlier this week even, that because of how the rules were written before this season, before they changed the rules last summer to come into place for this season with the like in-season charges and everything like that, because of how the rules were written that this case relates to in the 21-22 case, that the independent commission still has full discretion of how long it takes. It's totally up to them. It is totally up to so the Premier League really can't. If the Premier League are pressurising the independent commission, it doesn't look good. If Everton are pressurising the independent commission, it doesn't look good, because they're lawyers and accountants. They'll just say this is going to take as long as it takes. Now they will obviously work. They won't be working to like necessarily a 3 or 4 month timeline or anything like that. They will have that common sense of this needs to be done within 3 to 4 weeks, but they'll take as long as they feel they need to. That's reasonable. And clearly that process isn't finished yet. So it's frustrating, but unfortunately it kind of just is what it is. The rules have been changed because of that. So this deadline, this kind of format that you both talked about then, it is a sunny day plan from the Premier League that all this gets done in that time. But in theory, the independent commissions then have to work to this deadline, so they have to do it. So at the minute, they don't have a deadline they have to work to. For these next ones, they do. But it is pivotal that it gets done in the first place, and there can't be any hearing started until this one's finished, purely because this one's setting the precedent. As I said a few weeks ago when I was on, like, this is the first Premier League case now. So Premier League cases number 2, which is Everton, and number 3, which is Forest for 22-23. They're going to be using this one as the precedent. So they have to finish it. Because, in a best case scenario, all the 10 points come back for Everton somehow, I don't know, and they deem that it should be a transfer ban instead, implemented straight away, which would be damaging for Everton, let's put it that way. But they apparently, if, let's say that happened, then there is absolutely no precedent then for a points deduction for Forest or Everton. There's none. The precedent is a transfer ban. That sets the punishment. If Everton get 6 points back, let's say, does that then mean they'll get 2 points at the next charge because it'll be a third of the breach? We just don't know. So we've got to hope that this appeal obviously finds in our favour. But also, and I was having a bit of discussion about this today with a journalist, I think the feeling is that the Appeals Commission may well go a step further this time and feel the need to actually explain how they're working out. The original one didn't, and that was the big thing. They did a 40-page document, but the actual bit where it said a 10-point deduction was 35 words, and it just basically said all this all this happened, and they're getting 10 points, and there was nothing. There was no working out. There was no saying we've got 10 points and 6 for a breach and 3 because it's Tuesday and 1 because we don't like Sean Dyche. It's literally just, it was just 10 points. So there is a kind of a school of thought that the Appeals Commission will maybe kind of look to amend that, because I think Everton will probably have argued about that as well. And look, the appeal's taking long, but we don't know what Everton's case was. Everton's case could have been really, really thorough, and it could have been a lot better than it was in the first place. And it could be positive. It could be the fact that Everton have decided to argue every single point in that original report and really gone for it. And that's caused the Appeals Commission to have to think about it. It's really frustrating. It's really annoying. It's proved the rules aren't fit for purpose. They have changed. They'll probably need to change again in the summer, because clubs will insist that everything is done well in advance of the final weeks of the season. But we kind of are where we are with it as well. And, you know, we've just got to keep our fingers crossed. But yeah, I think we'll know in the next 3 to 4 days. That's my gut feeling. Obviously, it's just a guess, but we're hitting that 3-week deadline now. So I do expect it to be very soon.
No, that's a really interesting way of framing it. Actually, like I've just sort of been thinking, I just want it over and done with as much as possible now, because
I think that's the issue, isn't it? It's like
yeah,
everyone wants it over and done with, and I do think the Premier League executive board probably want it over and done with. They haven't got enough lawyers. Like they've got lawyers that are representing them. They've had to hire more for the the kind of the committee that has about 20 sports lawyers and accountants on it, that you can pick 3 from each time. The Premier League have had to go to them and ask for basically for more lawyers and barristers to be added to that, because of the potential that there's going to be, like, you know, coming up in the next 3 months, we could have 2 separate cases, and each one with an appeal. So that's 4 separate hearings, and that will have to be 12 people. And it can't be anybody that's already sat on Everton's cases this season. So it's like, it's a mess, and it shows like that it wasn't thought through at the time, because they probably thought no one would ever break it. But, you know, this is kind of what forward planning should be about. You should kind of do worst case scenario. And again, with this time frame that they've got, it's all like, oh, we'll definitely hit these time frames. But even the best case scenario for the Premier League's time frame has a potential backstop date of an appeal not being heard, and not being an appeal decision not being made until 4 days after the season finishes. So, you know, it genuinely could be that Everton and Forest are like this, where we have our appeals at the start of May and we're still waiting, aren't we? We'll be like in this exact same situation 4 days after the season finishes. So I don't think it'll get to that. I do think they'll get it. I do think everyone will kind of take lessons from this and get it pushed through quickly. But yeah, we've probably just got to sit and wait tight. And, you know, the lawyers will find out first for the Premier League and Everton. They get a copy of the report. I was told like that's about a day before, but some people have said it's hours before that they get to make any amendments, and then it's published on the Premier League website, and that's it. Like that's when it'll come. There'll be no leaks. Like, this isn't going to go to, I don't think this is going to go to favour journalists or anything like that, like news of the charges were. They're completely different. This is very much lawyers and accountants here. They're not going to risk their reputation by giving David Ornstein a ring. Like, you know, it'll be like last time, I believe, in that literally all the media will know 15 minutes before it's put online, and then that's it. And it's kind of the mad story. So yeah, just probably expect it to drop, I guess, in our inboxes, and that's going to be the fun of it.
yeah. It's just like, I just want to know if like a point to be a good result on Saturday. That's all I want to know. Like I want to go to the Brentford game in a few weeks in West Ham and think like a draw's fine here, or not. Like, and that's, listen, I don't ever blame Everton. I'm annoyed at Everton putting us in this situation where we're sort of in this weird dystopian football and experience, or the Premier League. But
Well, it's both. Like, it is. I saw Simon Jordan earlier saying it goes with the prevailing wind sometimes, but saying that, oh, well, why would it affect the team? Of course, it affects the team for that exact reason. Like, do you need to go to Brighton and get 3 points, or do you need to go and play for a draw? Like that's a big difference.
It's like, what do you think the players are having a bit of a shit run of form at the moment? And like, you know, we all know that when spirits are down, like you start to get down on yourself, and like the conversations will have happened this week. I'm 100% sure, between players who have seen the results, or had a bad result, or they've had they've looked at the table and seen they're in the relegation zone. Like one of them said to the other one, like, oh, God, there's nothing to do with us. This, why are we getting grief for it? And that will have happened. I'm sure it would have happened with the staff and all people at the football club. So I think you're right. There's no way you can say this doesn't impact what's going on at Everton, because I think when times do get tough, you do get hard on yourself and you do start to feel a little bit sorry for themselves. And people might be saying, well, the professional footballers, you shouldn't be doing that. The human beings, and ultimately they are paying the price, the lads on the pitch at the moment and the coaching staff, for stuff that happened well before they were even here. So let's just get it done as soon as possible. Let's finish off by talking about some actual footy, lads. 5-1 at Brighton last season, Mick. Is this team in its current state capable of going and doing not that, but something like that again, do you think, this weekend? Or are we a bit... I suppose that kind of came from nowhere, that Brighton win last season, didn't it? But I sort of look at McNeil and Decore not being quite fully fit yet, Dom being off it. Feels like a few players are going to need to find some form from somewhere for us to be able to repeat a performance like that.
Yeah, I think that the possibility of it repeating itself is probably very, very low. That says that there's no way, like there's no two ways about it, that this team can go and perform and replicate the same performance level, considering they're a better team than the team that went to Brighton in May. Their confidence might not be is high, but all they got to do is, I suppose, do what they did last year and then score after 30 seconds or something like that. I mean, we did the exact same in October against them as well. So, but yeah, weirdly, I'm kind of looking forward to it, to be honest. And I'm not confident as such, because, you know, Brighton are a good team, and I know they've not been on the greatest run for a decent spell now. But there's still, you know, they watched the game on Sunday against Sheffield United, and obviously they were down facing 10 men, but you know, just the way that they move the ball is mesmerising at times, even as someone watching. And you know, they're obviously a very good football side and very good at what they do, but equally, you know, still watch that, especially, you know, even when they were facing 10 men, to be honest, there were parts in that game where Sheffield United won the ball and were able to break through. Even, you know, 11 v 11, you know, there are weaknesses in that Brighton team, and I think there are potentially weaknesses that align to our strengths maybe, and I don't think we face a team like that for a couple of weeks now, really. So it wouldn't surprise me if we won. I think if you know, you said to me on Monday morning, Everton are going to take 4 points from Crystal Palace and Brighton, you know, I'd maybe be leaning towards more Brighton being the more favourable game for us to win, just because the way this team have been this season. But yeah, maybe we've not won a win. We've not won an away game for a while. So, and I know we've won quite a few this season already. So, but I'm ready to be greedy. Let's go win.
How do you feel about it, Patrick? You still said you felt more confident for this game than Palace on Monday.
Yeah, I keep going between that, flipping between that, and then just worrying we have a performance bit like we had against Wolves in December. But I guess that I think that's the only one really where you can put that entirely down to, like, just they look knackered, didn't they, after a big run. You know, I think we showed against Spurs exactly what we can do on the road in an attacking sense and from open play. And look, I think Everton were brilliant that day. That's probably the best performance we've seen all round, and Everton were just very, very unfortunate. In the game last year, I actually missed that I was away, and like I remember just getting the text and being like, I should never watch an Everton game again, and then found somewhere to watch the City game, and my missus wasn't happy with that, but anyway, I couldn't stick to it. But it seemed like obviously everything went right last year, didn't it, in terms of really clinical. I actually wrote in that Opta analyst piece as well, just how like clinical Everton were. I think Brighton we only had maybe like 6 or 7 shots on target or something like that. Like, and 5 of them went in, or 4 of them went in, and the others an own goal. You know, Brighton kind of peppered the goal. Pickford was on form, but everything went right from a counter-attacking standpoint. I do think like that the athleticism of Decore and not Decore, sorry, Iwobi, and I think Iwobi's probably been missed in games like against Palace this season. He frustrated the life out of me, but he had that ability to kind of get through the thirds and carry the ball down the middle of the pitch, and he did that really well last season against Brighton. So we won't have that
goal, wasn't it? He sort of strides through midfield and plays a really good pass, doesn't he?
Yeah, Solly March's hamstring just popped, didn't he? And then he put McNeil through. But yeah, like we've got Decore. If we can get Calvert-Lewin, what would 17 headers the other night, and I think 10 of those were in the attacking third or something mad like that. So if we can get runners off him, which we have done in away games really well, then I think we've got a formula to work there. Dyche has a decision to make. He's got to be brave. I think he bottled it on Monday with putting Amadou and Arna on the bench. I think it was the easy decision because I think for us, for a lot of fans, it should be it's either an Arna and one other or Idrissa Gueye and one other. But I think for Sean Dyche, it's probably James Garner and one other, and that's fine. I know he really likes James Garner. I think James Garner's a busy player, but I think he needs to make a brave decision and realize we need an Arna in there because we need someone who can keep the ball. I think with what we saw against Brighton in November, wasn't it, that we just couldn't, even though they didn't really create anything and got lucky, we couldn't get out because we couldn't get hold of the ball in midfield because Onana wasn't fit and it was just going straight back to them. And so we need someone who can do that. We maybe even, and maybe we look at maybe replicating the style that we play at Brentford earlier in the season. And maybe it's time I'd give McNeil a rest personally, but I know he then delivers. He's got that quality cross and things like that, but I think he doesn't look fit. He isn't tracking back. He's knackered. And I want to see Harrison given a go on the left because that's where he was at his best for Leeds. But maybe you could look at that and say, if he doesn't want to drop James Garner, put James Garner on the right, put McNeil or Harrison on the left, and then you've again got that winger to bring on, that fresh legs, which I do think is really important, having an attacking change. So yeah, sorry, a very long-winded answer there, but I think there's definitely potential for it to go really well. I'm just trying not to get overconfident and like think it's going to be like last season because that did rely on a lot of things kind of just going our way, didn't it?
Yeah, 100%. I wouldn't be surprised if he went with Garner right wing. I was sort of thinking about that a bit today. But yeah, one last thing about this game. I was watching the highlights back before we came on, and still my favourite thing about the whole match.
Good times, Matt. Good times.
My favourite thing about the whole match is the fourth goal when McNeil has walked past the keeper. Everyone's given up, and the ball's on his right foot. The goal gaping, and he's still not confident enough to just roll it in with his right foot. So he runs around the ball to knock it in with his left foot, still with a yard from goal with nobody anywhere near it. It was absolutely amazing.
I saw something a few weeks ago, and I think it was from Opta, and they'd done like or Stats Bomb or something like that, and they'd done like they ranked players based on the percentage they use the 1 foot, like players' one-footedness. And Dwight McNeil was 97% left foot. And I was thinking, I don't know how he's got that 3%. I was shocked that it was that high.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it was brilliant. It was a great commitment to the cause, wasn't it?
It was like quite like sweet and endearing in a way as well, like the whole thing. Because he's like celebrating in a really awkward way, isn't he? And then he's like, oh no, wait. I've got to run around this and knock it in with my left foot still. But yeah, just amazing watching those highlights and seeing how we played in that game last season. So yeah, here's hoping we'll do it again. But I think a 2-1 or a 1-0 would absolutely do for us this weekend. Nice one, lads. Cheers to Patrick. Cheers to Mick. If you want to read Patrick's piece, I will put that link in the description for this podcast or on YouTube, whatever you want to get hold of that. It's well worth a read ahead of the weekend's game. And yeah, if you watch us on YouTube, give us a rating, give us a like, comment on what you think is going to happen this weekend, what you thought about the game on Monday, or give us a rating or a review if you listen to this on iTunes, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your podcast. But yeah, that's it from us here on the Weekly this week. We'll catch you soon. Up the toffees.